just for me, man.
All right. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Jessica Miranda. I am a board member for Winton Woods, also homeowner, community member, parent, all those good things. I want to welcome you tonight and thank you very, very much for spending your time with us this Tuesday evening. This is the second of our 2 stakeholder meetings. And I want to go ahead and get started by letting you know the meeting objectives. Let me go ahead and go to this next one. So tonight, we want to ensure that stakeholders have full understanding of the importance of the school bond issue and what will occur based on the passage or the failure of this bond issue. And we also want to identify constructive actions that can be taken after this meeting. I believe 100% that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create new buildings for our students here in the district, and we really hope that this passes November 4th. Now, let me go back. Okay, now, we'd like to do a warm-up question before we bring up our first speaker. So, based on your awareness, everyone in this room, and knowledge, by show of hands, how many of you would think that the bond issue will pass? Okay. Question 2, based on your awareness and knowledge, by show of hands, how many of you would think that the bond issue will not pass? Okay. Based on your awareness and knowledge, how many of you just don't know? Okay. Thank you. We will wrap back around to that question at the conclusion of our meeting. Right now, I would like to bring up Mr. Randy Seymour, who is the treasurer for the Winton Woods City School District. He's going to go over with you tonight the differences between a bond issue and an operating levy.
Talk into this? Yes. First of all, as corrected from the last work session, we currently have no bonded debt in the district, and we did pass our last bond issue 34 years ago. But all that debt has been paid off for the last 7 years. So currently the Winton Woods School District has no bonded debt, meaning we have no debt for construction of new facilities. And this is a bond issue, unlike an operating levy. You're all used to the operating levies that come before you every 4 to 5 years in Winton Woods based on past history. This bond issue will only be used to construct new buildings. We can't use it for salaries or benefits or any discretionary spending that the board would decide to spend the funds on. It can only be directed back into new facilities or construction of buildings. So with that in mind, just bear in mind, we have not asked for any bonded debt millage for at least over 30-some years in the Winton Woods District, unlike operating funds. Thank you.
I should have done that part. Okay. Question. If this whole experience didn't cost you any money, because Board Member Miranda came up and asked a question, a preliminary question in the beginning. She said how many people were for and how many people didn't think it would pass and how many people thought it would pass, right? So if it didn't cost any money, any more money, how many people would support it? If it didn't cost a dime more?
Yeah, but was the question cost or didn't?
No, support it. Yeah, if it didn't cost a dime, if it didn't cost you anything, how many of you would support it? All right, okay.
That's different.
No, this is, yeah, no, this is my question. Hers, get rid of hers, this is mine now. Okay, all right. So, here's the deal. It does cost something, and we're aware that it does. But I don't want us to be confused about the process. All right? Everybody in this room pays taxes. And you pay taxes for things that you want. You pay taxes for things that you support. And if Marvin were in the room, he would let me say this because we're friends. Marvin Lewis. All right? How many of you been to a Bengals game? You pay a portion of your ticket is a tax. And sometimes they don't win. Right? And for years they didn't win. But we kept going to the games because that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to support that. Right? And so we figured out something that if we support certain initiatives, then they should have a return on our investment. We should support it and things will turn out right. Well, sometimes we have to put more into it. And I'm not talking about putting more money into it. I'm talking about putting more energy into it. See, this is about energy. This is about motivation. This is about aspiring our kids to be better, do better, and have better opportunities. So I have this great opportunity every Friday, and it's called Lunch with the Superintendent. And I meet young people, and they're seniors, and I talk to them about what they aspire to be and what they think they need to do to get to that level of high experiences and expectations. And so someone told me that our kids aspire to have ACT scores that are 13 and 12 and 14. I've talked to 9 groups of young people. They don't say that. They're aspiring to have ACT scores of 27s, 29s, 30s. So I met a young lady last week, and her ACT scores are 32. What's a perfect score?
33, I think. Isn't it?
36. She says, I have to take it again to see if I can do better. All right? That's one of our students. So we keep getting this barrage of statements from the public, and the public has the right to say whatever they want. Our scores are not good enough, so we don't deserve to have new buildings. Those two things don't go together. You might think they do, but they don't. I look at my colleagues down the street south of us, Cincinnati Public. If the schools were supposed to be built based on scores, Ms. Wallace and Ms. Martin, you lived there with me before. How many buildings would be built, Ms. Wallace, you think?
Roughly 5.
Out of how many?
50 elementary, high school together.
50. 5 are high flyers. All right? So people say, well, your report card, you have F's and D's. Well, there are other districts with F's and D's because the state changed the formula and made it a lot more rigorous to get A's and B's. And I expect the state to do that because it should be harder to get A's and B's. Now, when we rise to the occasion and we get A's and B's, they'll change it again. So it seems like it's not a conspiracy theory against Winton Woods, but it seems like every time we get the A's and B's, they change the formula. So the state declared the buildings were struggling in 2003. See, this is really not about scores. This is about an opportunity. The state declared the buildings were ineffective in 2003. The state, not me, not the board president, but the state, the architects, the engineers. But the scores were good in 2003. They weren't excellent. So why didn't the community do something then? Because it wasn't about the scores. See, this is about money. At the end of the day, it's about money. Because most of the people in this room said, if it didn't cost me anything, we would support it tomorrow. But certain things that we have to support will cost money. So if you have to make repairs on your home, it costs money. I don't care how great of a homeowner you are. I don't care how great you take care of the property. Things happen to the property along the way. Dr. Holden, you mentioned the house you lived in before needed a roof. And you said you will never move into a house with a flat roof again. All right. But if somebody gave you a free house with a flat roof, would you move into it? Okay. All right. There you go. Yeah, you would. She would. Okay. All right. That wasn't a trick question for you, Doc. It's just that it's about opportunities. And our kids, some of our students come from struggling situations. And they are in our schools that are not right for struggling situations. So they're in homes for 7 hours, 8 hours a day where they're sleeping. They're only 24 hours. Then they come to schools that are not equipped for 8 more hours. And so where is the relief? Where is the relief? Now, of course, we can't change the socioeconomic conditions, but if you were at the last board member meeting, one of the board members mentioned something that the socioeconomic conditions change the variables in our children's lives. We can't change those things, but man, we sure can put them in a better place so they can really like coming to school. Yes, I worked with a group of young people that were poorer than the kids in Winton Woods. Yes, they were. And Mrs. Martin was there with me. And the kids had very little, but they did have pride in their community. And so when when the Board of Education decided to build a new Taft, guess what? We were excited. And so we put up all the renderings, all the drawings, and things became excited all over again. Then they moved us into a swing space that was 6 buildings that weren't connected to each other. That was the worst possible educational system I'd ever been in my life. It was a California construction, but we don't live in California. So every time you had to leave building 1 to go to building 2, you always had to go outside. It compromised my security. It compromised my uniform. It compromised wearing coats and hats. But guess what? The students said we have pride in this opportunity because there was a big picture of the new building. The attendance improved. The attitudes improved. The academics improved. And so people say there's no direct correlation between the two. Yes, there is a direct correlation because I've lived it. You were one of my Cincinnati Bell tutors. If everything that I'm telling the public right now, is it the truth?
It's the truth.
100%.
100%.
Okay, you saw it.
I saw it.
Okay. So in order to get this thing done, this cost money. It is not free. And if the state funded schools the way that they were supposed to, we wouldn't have to keep coming back to you. But right now we have to. So we're not building buildings for our children. No, we're building buildings for future children. Because good systems have to prepare for the future. That's what good systems do. Right or wrong? You can't live right now. You have to live for what's going to happen next. That's where they call it a plan. So I'm not here to try to convince you to do it. I'm just telling you about the compelling pieces that shoulder our responsibility that says we have to do it because our children deserve it. So the girl who talks about wanting a 32, having a 32 and wanting a 36, that's a different attitude. And so someone told me the students that are at the Oaks, we have about 100 students at the Oaks, Dr. Holden.
Correct.
They said that they are receiving a dismal education. So I went to see. I'm curious. And when I went to visit the children, guess what I found out? They are working in fields that they like, but all of them are talking about post-secondary opportunities. They're going to college. So I hear so many myths about Winton Woods, and for the most part, it's a story. Many of the pieces don't have facts. The first week of school, we had to have a delay. We had a power failure. But if we had the backup generator in the new school, we don't miss a beat. What happened today? Or was it yesterday? Yesterday. Water main break. Flooding the classroom. Yes, damaging the computers. And Principal Martin came in, not the beautiful Principal Martin, the other one. All right. He came in and says, relax, it's going to be okay. And the students are relaxed because they knew it was going to be okay. But we shouldn't have to put our children in those adverse conditions. It's not right. And so the question is, do they deserve better? Absolutely, they deserve better. And the taxpayers can make that decision. So for everybody in the room that says, I don't know, well, go inside the schools. And then you'll make a decision that says, let me think about this again.
That wasn't the question.
But that,
You're
I'm not confusing it. Am I?
oh, yes. You're asking us a question as if we answered it that we didn't know.
Oh, no.
That others are going to vote.
I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention. My intention was just to, I wrote this speech, so I just wanted to use it.
What you just said now doesn't relate to what we voted on.
Okay, so what did you vote on?
Whether we thought it would pass, not whether we agreed with it.
Okay, so my question is, all right, do you agree with it? Okay, all right. So you agree with it, and for the people in the room that says, I agree with it, did you tell somebody else why you agree with it? See, people expect the educators in the room to say, we agree with it and we support it. But where we get the momentum is for the people that are not educators that work in a school that says, we agree with it because. See, the buildings are not for me. They're not for us. They're for the children. So if the district decided, you know what, Superintendent Smith, we're going to do the 2 buildings, but you stay in the small area where you are, and we're not going to improve that area, I would be happy. I would be happy because most of my work is in the buildings anyway. So it wouldn't change my life, but it would change theirs. So that's the attitude and that's the decision that we have to make down the road. And I am happy that I'm seeing signs pop up all around the place that people are saying we're all in. The sign is one thing, but getting out November 4th, that's the whole attitude. And so some of our teachers don't live in the district, but they can still support the operation. They can still give us the momentum that we need to make this a reality. Mr. Denny wrote a nice article, and I think it has something to do, it's a very compelling piece. We could make history in this district. I would like to be part of it. We can make history in this district. And so when you look at your taxes, your state taxes, they fund other things. However, Mrs. Bray, you can't tell your taxes where to go. The state determines that. And I can guarantee you there's a district somewhere, maybe further up north, that's hoping that we don't get the 33 million. They hope that we don't use it because they get to use it. Do we know how many opportunities we get to do this? It changes.
It was 3, wasn't it?
Depends on how many elections there are from the side.
Yes. So if we're close, we might do it again. If we're far away, taxpayers are already said, not interested. So my piece is just to give you the information to make you aware that we have a responsibility, and our responsibility is for the children that we serve. And even if you say, I don't have anything to do with the schools, if you live in the community, you do. Because this is part of your responsibility that says, we are educating our entire community, not just a group of kids, but the entire community needs to be refreshed. There was a lady that sat right where you are last week, and she said something, I moved here because of the schools. Now I'm hearing people say, I moved out because of the schools. The problem with it, the property that you value, it would be a better return on your property if there were some schools that you could be very, very proud of. I mean, those are the pieces. Those are the pieces to the puzzle. How many big businesses are in this area, Mr. Henderson? There are a lot?
You mean in the fourth one?
Yes.
Oh,
Not too many. Think it has anything to do with how we do business? Absolutely. Yes, it does. So we can change the course of who we are and what we do just by stepping out there saying that we're going to support what's right for children. Because the children don't understand. They think that when we're putting those signs up, they're just thinking this is automatic. These adults have to support us because they send us to school every day and they believe in education. So the kindergarten kid that's walking down the hall, do they believe that we're not going to support this? They just think like, oh yeah. They just go on about their way. The adults will take care of it. But they don't understand that there are some adults that are opposed to it. And again, if it were free, people might do it. Ms. Wilson, when's the last time you received something for free that was worth something? A long time. Everybody here has seen an advertisement that says free. Is it really free? No. We pay for what we want. And we get what we need. Sometimes. So, are there any questions for me?
Yeah, you've got this, the signs are appearing.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a supporter, I've been to a lot of meetings, and I haven't a clue what they refer to. Just think about all those people that don't have anybody
Yes.
in the community. I've seen one great big sign at Schroyer which explains it, but those signs are very nice, but they don't do anything. And I've seen nothing that explains stuff. There are a lot of people in Green Hills, and Jack, you know this for a fact, there's still a lot of anger over what happened years ago. And the council didn't really support a lot of bond issues then, and I think that's a lot of where the root of some of the problem is. But people need to be educated, and I've seen nothing that's come to my home that talks about this kind of thing.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Because I think you make some very, very great comments. What should it look like?
Well, the communication?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, you need to send something that's rather concise, but talks about these kinds of things. Because when, Mr. Denny, when there were the tours of the schools,
Yes.
there were less than 10 people. 10 people from Springfield Township, Green Hills, and Forest Park that had the guts to come out and take a peek at the buildings. They
You are
don't know what
100%
they're
correct.
talking about. How do we get those people to come out? Where are the councils? Jack, where is the council, the village council supporting this kind of thing?
The village council is rather split over the issue.
And that's why we're going to have trouble.
You just made some very, very interesting comments, and I appreciate you being here.
If our leaders aren't there leading the way,
And you know what? Our children think our leaders are there.
they haven't been there for years.
But our children think the leaders are okay because
Children learned years ago that they weren't there when they failed levy after levy after levy.
the young people that I've talked to recently believe that the leaders are there. And they believe that November 4th is going to be just an awesome day. That's what our children think.
I hope they're right.
So do I. So they have faith in something. They believe in something. And maybe it's their teachers, and maybe it's their administrators, and maybe it's just the staff in general, but at least our kids believe that there is something going to happen. Even the seniors that I meet with every Friday, they know that this something is not necessarily for them, but they're excited about it. Is this a child issue or an adult issue?
I think it goes back further than that.
Okay. All right.
I think she did make a good comment that the signs were all in, people do not know what that means.
I had no
You
clue. I
need to
asked
get
a
out
question.
more information.
Okay. All right.
Facts.
And remember, part of this meeting is so that you can tell us how to get better. Mr. Henderson mentioned something when we were talking about getting this meeting underway. He said, if we do this right, the people will tell us what parts we're missing. Well, you've told us. And so each week we get better. And so how many weeks do we have left?
13 days.
13 days. 13 days. And if we didn't have this meeting and hear these pieces and these facts, we would just kind of keep operating on the way that we do. Mr. Seymour mentioned something when he first stepped up. This is the first time we've asked for a bond issue to be placed on the ballot. So we're very unfamiliar with the work. We've done the operating pieces, but he was very, very careful to say that the bond issue is very, very specific. It is about the buildings. It is not about the operating.
Yeah, but the people need to know that, and this is the first time I've heard this, 2 weeks before the election.
Wow.
You've got to get the information out to the people.
Okay. All right. So people,
Too, I got a question.
yes, ma'am.
How come a few years ago, we broke all the schools up into K through 3 and 5 and 6 and all this stuff? And all of a sudden now you want to go back to K through 6 in one school and 7 through 12 in the other? What's the reasoning behind this?
Well, there are two reasons. Number one, when you look at test data and test scores, when our students go into third grade, I'll just use that as an example, they struggle. When they're in fourth, they get better. When they transition to a new building, fifth grade, they struggle. When they're in sixth, they get better. When they transition to seventh grade, they struggle. When they're in eighth, they get better. We keep seeing the same data over and over and over. We were just talking about it today. We know that there's compelling information that says the more consistent they are in the buildings, the better they do. That's why the consistency comes out when they're in grades 9 through 12. They have 4 years of experiences and create better relationships with the adults. So the rules change.
The idea was all bad then, the K through 3.
I wasn't here.
Well, that was just put in a few years ago. When
Okay, all right, I'm kidding. Whatever Winton Woods is responsible for, I am here, so I'm responsible for it. All right? I didn't say it was bad. It was just that they thought that that would be the way to make it happen. Well, once we start making some decisions and we start seeing how young people are progressing, we're saying, we need to make some changes. And the reason that we're going to try this 7th through 12th grade experience is the state of Ohio has made some very, very definitive statements about education. They're saying our students need 4 years of math. In a traditional high school, if you start out 4 years of math and your first year is Algebra 1 in 9th grade, and you struggle with Algebra 1 as a 4-year experience, you're already struggling and your opportunity to graduate is diminished. What if students took Algebra 1 as a 7th grader? That means they have 6 years to do 4 years of math. They have 6 years to get 4 years of math done. Now, one of the things that I can tell you when I'm meeting with the young people in the lunch with the superintendent, I'm hearing young people say, I love math. That's not a regular thing. Somebody in that school is getting them introduced to math where they like that subject. And they're talking about, I love art, I love music, I love history, I love science. So we have some compelling arguments, but I think that we would have done a better campaign if we would have let you talk to the children. Because they're going to tell you what they believe they need in order to be successful. All right? So here's my last piece. Ms. Ruggles, you work at Cincinnati State. That used to be Old Quarter Tech High School. All right? It was an old Cincinnati public school. I bet you if it stayed looking like it was, you wouldn't have the success that you have. It's been modernized and revitalized and revitalized and rebuilt and retooled, and your population has grown. And your opportunities for young people have grown, okay? So they didn't ask for a brand new Cincinnati State. They just asked for it to be put in a situation where they can compete, all right? Did we really need 2 stadiums so the Reds can lose and the Bengals can lose too? The city decided we want to make sure that we have other opportunities in those places. So we rebuild and retool and reshuffle because the surrounding areas, the things around us change along the way, so we want to be competitive. Open enrollment is a great thing if you get the kids. Open enrollment is a bad thing if they go somewhere else. So we have an open enrollment opportunity. The Viking Village is not finished. It will be soon. It is absolutely incredible. Oh, wait a minute. Do they have any F's and D's on their report card? Yeah, they do. mostly every school in this state, because the state changed the formula and made it more rigorous. I'm happy that it's more rigorous, but we will rise to the occasion. But we need the community supporting us with that work. So we build on to get better. And I asked a question last week, how many of you have ever moved before? And if you moved to a worse house, raise your hand. Okay, we usually move to a better place. Our children don't have that luxury. They're where they are. But we have to support them where we can take them to a whole new level if we put them in the right and give them the right opportunity. That's all we want. But it will cost money. It is not free. And I wish it didn't cost a dime, but the reality is it does. We can't change that. But if we build the new buildings, in the long run, do we save money, Mr. D? Yes, sir. See, people think that zero is an option. Zero doesn't exist. It does not exist. You say, okay, no new buildings. Well, you have to fix up the old ones. And remember, the state declared the buildings what they were in 2003. That's kind of like 11 years ago. Let your house just stay in repair 11 years ago. You probably wouldn't have a house now. So that's where our argument is. But we're not arguing with the taxpayers. We're saying, do you know the facts? And I appreciate your comments, because if we're not getting the word out to the people, then guess what? We're missing an opportunity. And here's my last piece. What I would hate to see happen is November 5th, and we're watching the election take shape November 4th, and we're watching the poll and the yes and the no's, and people are like, I didn't even know there was an election. I didn't know there was an opportunity. And they tell us November 5th, we would have supported it, but we didn't know about it. That would be heartbreaking. That would be the worst news that I've ever heard in my life. And so you're telling me that somebody's going to say that.
Oh, lots of people are going to say that. Those signs don't tell you anything. Like I said, I'm a supporter, and I asked a bunch of people, do you know what this means? And they did not.
Okay. So we have some work to do in 13 days? 13 days. All right, Mr. D.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. It works. It works. It does feel good. Well, I want to echo what you've heard already, and thank you for coming this evening. Thanks for being here. I'm Steve Denny. I'm the Director of Business Affairs for the district. So what you've heard from Mr. Smith is his heart and his passion for our students, for our community. And this isn't just about kids. It is about the whole community. At the end of the day, this meeting was not really about trying to convince you to vote yes. We're going to lay out the reasons why we think it's a good business decision. And that's my role right now in this part of the presentation. So I'll accelerate through these slides and just share with you why it's a good business decision. But it is bigger than that. At the end of the day, the purpose of this meeting was to just make sure that the voters understand the facts and the consequences for passage and non-passage. And the reason you've been invited here this evening is because we know you are people that talk to other people and you influence others. And we're asking at the end of the day that you just take the information you gain here and share it with somebody else. Share it with several somebodies if you would, so that our community is better informed about the consequences of passage and the consequences of failure, because there are significant consequences either way. So let me just touch on this slide. Mr. Smith connected with some of these points, but why this bond issue? Why now? Why? Who says we need new schools? And one of the points I just want to be clear on is, while Winton Woods might have said that, we weren't the ones that said it first, and we also aren't the ones that have said it the loudest. It's actually the state of Ohio that's come in on 2 different occasions to say, your buildings are not to state standards. There are rooms that are too small. There are corridors that are too small. There are stairways that are not ADA accessible. There's all kinds of issues in the buildings that are design issues. They are not easily correctable issues. So the states determine this. Because of that fact, the state's actually willing to pay 1/3 of the construction costs. That has to be their program. but their program is a good program now. And here's a couple facts on our schools. 84% of our kids leave here and go to post-secondary experiences. And with third grade guarantee, we had 96% of our third graders meet that requirement. We can build on that and increase that with better facilities. That's just a fact. So in order to move to the next level, we truly feel buildings are an accelerator. Why this bond issue? Has real potential to impact property values positively. There's research on this, most notably. And if you go to our website or guide anyone else to go to the district website, there are facts on that website under bond issue information. If you go to www.wintonwoods.org, whole slew of information about the bond, about school construction, new facilities, a variety of things. The Yale study is actually on there. There's a link to that, among several other studies. Not only will property values be positively impacted, but we truly believe that it will help attract great teachers, great families. Down to the next slide, we think it's more compelling for property managers to be able to sell the school system and sell properties and move properties. More appealing to businesses and more appealing to home buyers. And I'll be honest, our academics are not where we want them to be. I mean, that's just the reality. But there are things we can do with a plan to increase our academics and use facilities as an accelerator to build on that. So here we just touched on that. We truly believe facilities can be an accelerator. And this isn't just us. We've talked to other districts. We've talked to North College Hill. We've talked to Mount Healthy. We've talked to CPS. We've talked to, gosh, who haven't we talked to? They say the same thing. There were real changes that they saw. They saw improved performance. And there is research behind that. There's even some local research we've done at the request of our taxpayers. Like, hey, we want to see some of this. What's going on in Ohio? What does it say? What do we see? Supporting high quality instruction. And again, we've talked to other districts. And helping to provide a better, modern, more safer, healthy school environment is another byproduct we're very interested in for our students and families. Here's some of that local data. I just thought I'd share this with you. And again, this presentation's on our website. You've also got it there in front of you. So what we did is researched 49 school districts in Southwest Ohio, because if you take the 4-county region around us, there are 49 public school districts. 21 of them in the last 10 years, since 2004, have built new schools. 25 of them have not, and some built, but it was too far ago to get the data together. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but all this slide is intended to show is you can see a performance index, which is a really fair way to look at it because it looks at kids taking tests and how many of them do well, because it's all kids that get a performance index score. You can actually see an 18% larger mean gain across the same time period in Ohio, in Southwest Ohio, for districts that built new. We don't think that's an accident. And there's research to back that. But even locally, there's evidence. And all I'm sharing with you is some evidence. So this is what we kind of dubbed the new school effect. That if you look at the year before construction started, and then you look at the year after construction was complete, and you measure the improvement, this is the effect that we see. And that's a big deal because it's hundreds or thousands of kids in every PI point. So that's a lot of kids actually doing better. This is the surrounding region. This is the 4-county region we talked about. And all the green dots are districts that have built new. Many of them using the tax dollars that our community members have paid into. And it's gone to the state and it's been redistributed to these places. That's what we have an opportunity to do now, is capitalize on that investment that we've made in the form of our own tax dollars. Why this bond issue? Well, it allows community improvements also. Like we've said, this is not just, in our estimation, about students, schools, staff. It's also about the whole community. This is a chance to revitalize our community. Forest Park, Green Hills, and the township. We talked about bringing tax dollars back home, but it's also a chance to, with our community's input, because this is not just going to be a Winton Woods decision or some municipality decision, but the district is very interested in getting the community into our buildings. Good things happen for children when that happens. And so we have an opportunity to create some type of community center in our schools. And we want that. We're interested in that. And the district is even willing to operate it. Why? Because it makes sense for our students. It's a good business decision. We can recruit tutors and mentors and involve people in the lives of our children when they come into the school. And we know that. If we can get them in, they get connected. We also have the opportunity to create something that our students who might come from an under-resourced background, something that they might need right there on site that also benefits the surrounding community. And if you go to Cincinnati Public or you visit, say, the Oilers School or Riverside East or any number of schools, I believe 30 Cincinnati Public Schools, of the 56 that are in the district, I believe 30 of them have a community learning center in them, currently operating. It is a model to copy, I'll just be honest with you. I salute them and what they've done. And they credit their CLCs with some of their academic improvement. Because if you can meet the basic needs in the Maslow's hierarchy, right? Meet the basic needs, you can get more to the self-actualization and the learning and the connection and the self-esteem. So there's an opportunity to do that. We can't really do much of this. Some of it we can. In our current buildings, we could do that. We've done it before. It's not optimal. We could do it. We currently do this one. We have partnerships with the Talbert House and Children's Home to provide services for some of our students that have that particular need. But we can't get that or anything like that in our schools right now. It's just not feasible. So it does allow for some community improvements. This, if you walk away with nothing else, this might be the point I'd like you to walk away with and help other people understand it, because this is probably the most common thing I hear. If we say no, this just goes away. And unfortunately, it doesn't. We're at a point now where we've got to do something, and we are on the cusp of significant costs. They're coming. It's not a threat, it's just information. They're coming. We're at a point where doing nothing is not an option. So, again, the purpose of this meeting is to just inform you of the consequences of passing this or not passing this. If it doesn't pass, we're going to have to retool and look at Plan B, and our board will lead that. But Plan B has significant costs tied to it. We'll get to that in just a moment. Future costs are certain. It's time. The building structures are good. The component systems inside the building are not. And it's not because we didn't maintain them. We've poured millions into the buildings and maintenance. There comes a time where you have to revitalize your buildings. It's not neglect. It is simply a function of time. And the buildings are 40 to 50 years old. The average age of a school building in the United States, I know this because I've just memorized trivia, but 48 years. That's the average age of a school in our country. Our buildings are there. It's time. Saying no to new schools, a bond issue, means saying yes to something else. So there are costs regardless. It's a question of which cost do we want. And it's a value proposition because it does cost money. Source of funds, and this is the scary part. So we don't have the kind of money we need on hand in the general fund to do all the repairs we need to do. But that's where the money will come from. If we don't have another funding source, that's what the bond is about. If you don't have enough money to do something, what do? As consumers, we incur debt. We borrow money. Well, in the school world, we have to ask the permission of the community if that's okay, because that is really their school. It's their money. So that does mean future operating levies, because we'll accelerate the cycle. Probably most of the people in this room understand in Ohio, you get a flat amount of income when you pass a levy. It doesn't increase with property values going up. It's frozen. That law passed in the 1970s. So your costs do this, right? But your income does this. When that happens in our personal lives, we either have to cut something or try to figure out a way to get more money. And so the same thing happens to schools in Ohio over and over and over again. So we will have to come back and ask for money, or we'll have to cut programming. That'll be the choice we're faced with. Cutting programming is not a good thing. We did that in this district. We cut 73 positions in 3 years, over $5 million, and it helped us financially. And we didn't come back to the voters and ask for more money, because we are very sensitive to the fact, our board, our leadership team, that our district is the 4th highest tax rate in the county. We're very sensitive to that. That's why reconfiguration happened. To your question, it was about money. We saved $1.6 million in 2007 dollars. Since that time, we've saved almost $16 million. So it decelerated an operating levy ask. That's why it was done. It didn't help instruction. Unintended consequences are sometimes something that, it's not the stuff you see coming that gets you, is it? It's the things you don't see coming. And so that was a very well-intended decision that has had other consequences. So this is our strategic plan. Now we're at a point in time, we're actually right there. This is, or excuse me, here. This is 14, 15. This is where we were in 12. We were below ODE standards. We actually came down this year. This is really not really even where we want to be. We want to be here. And so there's a plan in place to get there. We do have a strategic plan. We have a 3-year plan to turn the district around. It's based on strategies. It's the Ohio Improvement Process Plan, and it is strategic. I'll draw your attention to this because this dip that's right here, in a lot of ways, is the change in leadership. And that's not uncommon. When leadership changes, new pieces are put into place. What happens sometimes? There's a dip. But we know we need to turn it around. As I've said before, we're not where we want to be, and we're not where we need to be for our kids and our community. We drive up our academics, and we have new schools. You'll see property values go up. That's an investment. This is rate B. This is without new schools. We have to turn it around no matter what happens. It's not like, hey, if you build us new buildings, we'll do better. That's not what's being said. We have to do this. What we are saying is, guess what the evidence says will happen if we build new schools? Well, if we stuck a shovel in the ground today, it'd be 3 years before that building popped out of the ground. 3 or 4 years to build a new school. So we expect that in 18-19 is when that building could actually open if the bond issue passes. Funded in 15, the community engagement part begins where we work with the community to understand what the building should look like, what should be in the building, what types of things we're going to fund locally, what types of things we're going to work with the state on. All of that would happen in that year. And then the construction would start, the building would open, and we would see an acceleration. That's what we believe would happen. So if we play our cards right, we've got a unique opportunity to enhance services and property values in our district. The next 2 slides are just impact. What happens if it passes? What happens if it doesn't pass? So here's some key factors. And this is if it passes, and this is if it fails. So how about education for all kids? If it passes, we know we've got the state's Ohio School Design Manual behind the design. And it's good. It's a very good document. It's massive. But they've got it all spelled out, what supports high-quality instruction. If it fails, we have what we have. And our facilities continue to create barriers to some of the things we need to do, like project-based learning, for example. State dollars, if it passes, we get 33. They're telling us if you don't pass it, we don't give you money because we're not going to be able to do that. That's how the law works. Cost, if the issue passes, it's a $76 million project. The 33 is really from the state. So the project is actually 109, but the state kicks in 33, so our local cost is this. It is a 37-year bond. That's about $3.9 million a year. Here's, if it doesn't pass, it's a $68 million. That's our estimate, and that's a local estimate. That's not to state standards. That's to local Winton Woods standards to fix the roofs, replace the HVAC systems, upgrade the electrical components so it can support what it needs to support. And that's in this range, $3.4 to $4.5 million a year. Again, that's just money we don't have on hand. Cost to the taxpayer, if it passes, $24.73 a month on a $100,000 home, $21 a month if it doesn't, and that's just sort of annualizing this $68 million figure. That's the millage would be needed. Maybe not all at one time, but over time, that's the millage that would be needed to repair the schools the way we think they should, not even the way the state says they should be repaired, but the way we think. Here's the millage, 8.48. This is a total of 7.27. Here's the one-to-one cost, and this is up here because there was a community member, actually 2 different community members at 2 different meetings asked about this. Like, hey, this is 37 and this is 20. Can you give me apples to apples? So here it is, apples to apples. And it starts to break down, to be honest with you. I can't even quite relate to this. And there's so many variables that can interfere with it. But 76 over 37 is equivalent to repair costs of 131 over 37. I don't even know what to think of that. But I was asked to produce that figure. So there it is for your consumption and consideration. Cost to the taxpayer is still this, right? It's the same amount on this side if it passes. If it doesn't pass, this is equivalent to $21.90 a month, excuse me. Here's the millage. That's what this 131 is equivalent to, a 7.62 mill levy. On this side, and this is a little exciting because one of the things our community focus group said is operate efficiently. Came up in every focus group we did. Lean and mean. And if you build new, because you go from 6 facilities to 2, and the new buildings are so much more efficient utility-wise and operationally, you can save $1.5 million a year is what we estimate. So multiply that by the lifespan of about 50 years, 75 million. Very close to this, which is a capital cost. This is an operating cost, so they are two different things, but still money. Yes, sir.
I have apples to apples, and I'm not coming out with oranges.
Okay.
Your 76 million over 37 years versus 131 million over 37 years does not compute to 3.9 million per year for the 76 million. If you just do is use those numbers, the 3.5 million is correct for that, but it's 2.1 million for the other one.
Did you do this 76 divided by 37?
Yes.
I'm with you. And that's actually what I had too, until my esteemed colleague, Mr. Seymour, said, to be honest, you need to make sure that you include the interest costs.
Well, then you have to do the interest costs on the others, which are rolling, plus you also have to do inflation over those 37 years, because your 76 million will
Yeah.
be lower inflation than your 3,131 million.
Yeah. This side does have inflation calculated in. Inflation and soft costs is included in the 68. This is strictly a current value, you're right. It gets difficult to compare some of this sometimes, to be honest with you, because they're different things. They're apples and oranges in a way. So we try to make them apples and something like apples. But yeah, that's current dollars, and every year the cost goes up to build. Yeah, that's accurate.
And I think there's got to be a way of putting that down on paper that makes sense.
I would love to talk to you about it, or if you can noodle around with it, that'd be fantastic. Because yeah, I understand. Okay, so last slide, and then we'll get into some discussion with the group. These are some other factors to consider. Okay, student achievement. If the issue passes, we know we have improved capacity with better facilities. It's really no new capacity. I mean, everything we do is with what we currently have, and we don't have the accelerator down the line. Student attendance, we know it improves with new buildings. Student motivation goes up. Why? Because we've seen it. We've talked to people that have seen it. Property values increase. There's research around that. Nothing changes over here. Home buyers, new schools are a selling point. Old buildings, I mean, people don't think they're super attractive sometimes. I mean, that's the feedback we get. Family choice, new schools attract families. We actually have heard from parents who said, I left because of the buildings. Status quo otherwise. Student enrollment, if student enrollment goes up, which schools have said they get an enrollment bump when they build new, you get more funding from the state. Here, you have risk loss of students to other communities, and we have heard that parents have chosen other open enrollment districts because they have new facilities. Businesses, the investment in the community, a revitalization in the community could attract businesses, not to mention the jobs that are drawn in when the construction period is going on. And community benefit, possibility of shared facilities, community learning centers. Shared spaces really aren't feasible, not to the degree that would be impactful. So that's kind of the why and the what if and what not if. And again, you have some facts. I'll ask if you want a break. Do you want a break? 5-minute break? Or do you want to get right into the discussion part? Silence means no break. Keep going. All right, we got some diehards here tonight. All right, so this is actually the meeting summary and discussion phase. So this is the part where we invite you to ask questions. I would like to kind of hit the wrap-up post-test question again, and then I'll kind of reveal my crib sheet of what we were looking for in asking that. So based on what you know and what you're aware, and again, not just in this room, but what you're aware of, do you think the bond issue will pass? Okay. Do you think it won't pass? Okay. You don't know. Shoot. Okay. What we were trying to get after is, we wonder if the don't knows would diminish from the meeting. That's really what we were testing for. Because at the end of the day, when you leave here, You're going to vote how you're going to vote, and we respect that. That's the democratic process. That is our great state and our great country. That's how that works. And we as a district, we work for you. So we're going to do what you tell us to do. But we really wanted to see if we could impact the don't knows. So based on the meeting proceedings, how do you think people will vote and why?
I think it's still too high, and I can't see how 6 buildings are gonna cost $68 million just to improve.
It's over 20
6
years.
buildings, that's over $10 million a building?
Yeah, it's actually, if you do the state's renovation recommendations, we exceed the value of the buildings. It's kind of like when you take a car and you break it apart, you do the component costs of the car versus just buying a car new. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. Like a $19,000 car ends up costing you like $32,000 or something insane. Because the component cost of the parts is much greater than the sum of the whole thing when it comes off the production line. It's the same kind of idea, if that makes sense.
Who comes up with the amount?
The state of Ohio comes up with the amount of cost per square
Before
foot.
they give out any orders or, things?
Yeah, actually, they come in and assess your schools, and I'd be happy to show you this
We got
sometime.
lots of old schools operating in Cincinnati, they're probably 100 years old or so.
But they were built to last 100 years,
Now, I
or
think-
more.
I think if more people had shown an interest and come and visited the schools, they wouldn't be asking questions, do we need new schools? They would know the answer to that question. Less than 10 people from 3 communities thought it important enough to come out and take a tour. That was absolutely stunning.
But I don't know that it's thought it important enough. I don't know that they all move. Back to your first point. So you can go and
There
visit.
we did get information on that.
How did you receive it?
I think it came in the mail in a postcard.
And they were all called.
Yeah, we
Less than 10
The people in the
people
district.
came. And how many people actually, in this room, actually have parents in the district right this minute?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
How
Oh,
many people in this room actually have students? 1, 2, 3. Where are the parents? Where are the community members? That's the problem. Do they really care? Do they know? Where are the leaders?
my experience is the people definitely love their kids.
They
That
love
never
their kids,
changes.
but Are they,
We experience difficulty cutting through what I call the clutter of life to get to people. And to your point, we did do an 18,000-piece mailer in May to invite people to community meetings, of which we held 3. And at the meetings, we told people about the tour opportunities, and we did do 3 tour opportunities. So I appreciate your points.
that's a condemnation of our school district, of the support that we have. That's why I don't know if it's going to pass.
I hear you.
Just
Yeah, Mr. Hudson?
speaking as a parent and also being in the community for 25 years, it's sad that you get the exposure of people not showing up and that becomes an indication of what they may or may not do. But in reality, I would tell you, the parents will support it more so than the community people who have no children or have just lived here. They'll be the ones that will question, and I've been in these schools, I don't have to come and tour with you. You know, parents have been in these schools for 10, 15 years, those who have lived in the community. I don't need to really tour. That would be great. That's nice because that gives more exposure to the issue. But in reality, I already know, okay? So what you'll find is the people who are somewhat disgruntled, that's past history, that you have heard, exposed to that. And so you'll have a mixture of that. But in reality, I think the number of parents, if you could do a one-to-one relationship of this student has 1 parent, this student has 2 parents, however many voters you can come up with, opposed to the number of people who have no students at all, if that outweighs each other, I think you win. There'll be others in the community who have a vested interest.
Certainly, right.
In believing that this is an investment overall, but because those who don't believe in the system
and what they consider what leadership looks like, whatever you want to call that, whether that be council, school, whatever. But if they don't believe in the system, I don't really care what you show. It doesn't matter. My personal opinion is that you're not showing me anything that's going to change my mind, because I'm not invested in this anyway. It's just an opinion.
I appreciate the feedback. Yes, sir.
How many households in the school district have children in the school district?
How many households?
The percentage?
20%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be 25.
Right. Yeah.
Which is your problem, as you mentioned. That's a huge problem. You really need a message targeted to two audiences. One to the people with kids, who I think will be supporting you, I agree with that. And you need another message that's targeted to community members that do not have, couldn't care less whether the third grade scores are high or low, but really do care about their property values.
Right, right.
And I think you need to really divide them up and target those two audiences.
Appreciate that. And we're really getting into the next bullet, which I appreciate. What information should be communicated to voters from this meeting? So our job is to disseminate facts. I mean, that's our job in this process. Mr. Lee?
I think that there's a small amount of the voting population that has what is probably a legitimate concern with the fact that once the bond levy passes, very soon down the road will come an operating levy. And so, it's kind of a two-edged sword once you start down that path. Little Miami school district and their experience with that, is not out of many people's minds. Was any consideration given at some point to do a combo levy along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. And then some of the feedback we got on that was to combo it, you couldn't do the whole project. And an important point, I think this came up, the state determines the amount of the project. It's based on the number of students they think you'll have in 10 years, times the square foot per student, times the cost per square foot. It's a formula. They crank those numbers out, and out comes out came about 99 million. Now, we've added 10 million in LFIs for things we know our community needs and we think our voters really want. The community will determine that ultimately. But we've set aside 10 million in the funding for LFIs. Some of that's inevitable. If the community says we want brick facing front, or we want brick wrap, state doesn't co-fund that. That's a local cost. So those kinds of things. But they crank those numbers, here comes the cost. And if you try to do, you can't do the combo whole piece. You saw it's 8 mils. It's 8.5 mils. You'd have like a 12 mil issue to do a combo. Now Marymount did that a few years ago, and that's kind of the model we looked at but their construction project was much smaller because their needs weren't as great as ours. I mean, they didn't have as many students. They had about half the number of students we have. So if you're in the 8 mil vicinity, we feel like people will consider it. It's high. I mean, we're sensitive to that. And times are getting better, but they're still hard for some folks too. But an 8 mil, a 12 mil, but the feedback we got was if you build half your project, it will not pass because you're going to have to pick a community. That building's going to land somewhere. And we owe due diligence to all the communities we serve. So that's why when you look at the master plan, there's a building south of Sharon Road, and there's a building north of Sharon Road. I hope I answered your question. It would have been too big.
No, I agree.
Because we looked at segmenting too. Hey, let's just build one, then build another. And the feedback we got, and almost immediately, was, don't do that. You're downing it.
But at some point, that operating levy is coming.
Well, we know it's coming in 19.
Huh?
There's an emergency levy that expires in 19. Let's be open. I mean, that's our job, is to be transparent. Mr. Smith?
To the community member, thank you for your comments. I really appreciate them. But I think you make a very interesting point. If the community was coming into the buildings like they should be, we would have never said we needed anything. Community would have said, you need some new buildings. And that would have happened long before now, which means we would be saving money along the way. And maybe the operational levy that we need down the road is not as big, because you would have told us something. See, the strategy for CPS is a little different than Winton Woods. The parents said, what is this? And why is my kid living under these conditions? And so they came to the board saying, tell us what we need to do, because they had been in the buildings enough. And so that's where, when Mr. Denny mentioned about the community learning centers, and maybe we haven't been as transparent as we should have been, and maybe we haven't been as hospitable as we could have been, but if we have the community coming into the buildings on a regular basis, as often as they should have been, they would have told us something a long time ago.
Mr. Henderson?
In response to your third bullet, what information? I think the tag along part of that, and to whom should that information be directed? Because I think the subtext of this conversation is, who is it that we're really talking about?
Yes, sir.
And I think that, for me, it's the families who have kids in the district who don't have the option of sending their kids outside the district. For me, those are the kids and parents that are most dependent on the passage of this bond, because it's their singular opportunity to educate their kids practically speaking.
Yes, sir.
So for me, if that's the case, then I think the target is those families and those kids. Okay, now, regrettably, very often, those are the parents and the families who tend not to show up. Okay, like this is almost preaching to the choir, and so I think part of the challenge, the 2-week challenge, if you will, is to run hard at your primary target. Because they're the ones that can really, quite frankly, from my analysis, they can make or break this deal.
Yes, sir. Appreciate the input. Next bullet, what did you learn that might influence how you vote? Did you learn anything that could influence how you vote?
Again, I think you're asking two different questions. In the beginning, we were asked, what do we think will happen? And now you're asking about our individual votes. Those don't equal.
No, I just asked if you learned anything that could influence how you vote.
But I think we all came in here already knowing how we were going to vote.
Maybe.
I doubt that one of us learned anything that changed our mind.
Yeah, if you're a strong yes or a strong no, in my experience.
I was
Oh,
opposed.
You learned something
Okay.
about it?
But my husband is adamantly against it.
understand. Okay.
Until we see, every year they give their rating of the schools, and it's Cincinnati, Mount Healthy, Winton Woods, year after year. And my husband feels until it's eased up in the middle, he's not going to vote for anything else.
Understood.
I stay open-minded. I've always voted for the schools, but
Yes, ma'am.
I'm having my doubts too. But
One of the
I appreciate
things
what you're saying.
For me, Mr. Denny, is
Yes,
the
ma'am.
ADA. And again, if people got into the schools, we've been in the schools for years and years and years, so it wasn't like I had never been in there. But people need to understand that these buildings are nowhere near where they should be to take care of our handicapped children or to take care of our handicapped parents or grandparents or whatever.
Or anybody in the safety issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to get a couple,
If there were-
300 kids out of one of those
Yeah,
schools.
if there were a fire in some of those buildings, we would have a real tragedy.
Yeah, we've talked,
Yep. But
You and I have had that
you need to
conversation.
know that.
That's my question.
Yes,
How are
ma'am.
you going to get more information out?
well, that's part of what we're hoping to hear from you guys. We're looking for ideas, because I'll be quite honest and open. We've done a lot, actually. And what we find is it's not, this is the response we still get. I mean, we've sent home mailers, or more mailers are coming. People are knocking on doors. in the evenings on Saturdays. We've done emails, phone calls, phone banks. There's been technology used. There's robocalls coming. So there's a lot of, yeah, so we're looking for ideas. And one of the things we got at the last one was, and it ties in with what you've said, make a video. Then you got to let people know there's a video, so that it solves one piece because it allows people to, from the comfort of their home or their workplace, get into the school and look around and understand what is, that the need is real. So it's not fair for me to answer your question with a question, but I think we're looking for ideas, truly. And that's part of this meeting is we invited people who are influencers, and we knew that, with the hope that you'll talk to others and that we'll get some ideas from the group. And we've certainly gotten some of that too, so.
And if you know people who say, we're not quite sure what this is about, and we can connect with them, if you say, Superintendent, come and meet with me, we want you to come to their house, we want you to come to their businesses, their restaurant, I'll go anywhere, it doesn't matter. I'll start in the morning and finish it at midnight. It doesn't matter. But the thing that I don't want to happen is November 5th, people say, I would have done it, but I didn't know. So if anybody wants to set it up with me to say, if you come here, I think you would have an audience to talk about the compelling pieces about this bond issue, I would go anywhere.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Any other closing thoughts? Mr. Nwankwo?
Yeah, I just want to commend you and the superintendent on the work that's been done so far. We're involved in building the Princeton schools, and I know that it was a difficult levy to pass during an environment where it was very hard to pass anything. And I know that there were a number of strategies that were put in place, and I wondered if you've been able to touch base with them to learn some of the things that they did that made them successful.
We've not connected with them, but we've connected with some people who know them. And they've revealed some of the ideas and pieces that they've tried. We've also toured their school, and that was extremely motivational. So I appreciate what you're saying, though. Thank you. Thoughts, comments, suggestions? Questions?
I thought about what the gentleman said about it's 25% of the households that have students, and that's, kind of alarming because to know then there's 75% of the households who don't. And you have to meet people where they are, right? So of course, door to door is a method, but where do people come together, Church, Kroger's, Myers, I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, but just, I'm thinking about the strategy to get
Right.
to 75%.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Mr. Hudson. Thank you. Well, we want to thank you all for coming this evening. Appreciate you giving up time. We hope it's been nourishing and informational to you.
Food for anybody that wants to take some.
Yes, ma'am. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to stay after and talk with you. So thanks so much for coming out. Hope you have a great night. Thank you. Be sure to vote November 4th.